Even the most solid objects are actually empty space. Like I said, this was going to get weird. But we're all made up of molecules and atoms, as the Greeks tell us. But what the Greeks did not know is that there was vast amounts of space between each atomic particle, between each atom. And mathematically, you do not exist. This table does not exist. This room does not exist. So you're in the back saying, so does that mean class is dismissed? No. Whatever we are, we're going to continue. Whatever we are, we're going to continue. But you start getting into modern physics, and it's really a very, very strange world, or very, very strange, and maybe not even a world. String theory argues that all of us are just basically a mathematical equation. We're all an opera. I kind of like that idea, that we're just all vibrating atoms and such to a certain tune. And we're all our own individual song, if you would. Okay. The scientists even have what they call an address. An address is a location in time and space for any particle or any object. It's called an address. I like that. It's like you could send a letter to a molecule or something if you had its address. Okay. And there are people who believe that one day, everything that has ever lived will all merge into one gigantic electromagnetic cloud. All human thoughts, all plants, all animals, all things that have ever been, into one giant electronic dream that will be free to travel the universe and do as it chooses, which is an interesting thought, because you look at the ancient religions like Zoroastrianism, that we'll be talking about in a week or two. Many of the ancient religions, they believe the same thing. They believe that we live in an evil, corrupt world that is illusionary, a world that is a lie, if you would. But if you refuse to accept the lie, then one day the goodness in you will rise to the greater good above oblivion. The Hindu religion, even today, practices that idea. And so there may actually be scientific basis behind that. I guess depending on which science fiction novel you're reading. We've steadily learned that the laws of physics are based, we know that the laws of physics are based on mass, time, and space, but even that's not good enough, because the argument goes that time and space are actually the same thing, only we divide them separately. Now, if you want something that'll keep you awake at night staring at the ceiling, think about that hard enough. And as for mass, like I said, even mass is largely nothing. The universe is grossly unbalanced, and we do not know why. But we're awfully grateful that it is, because we would not exist if the universe were in perfect harmony. Now, Albert Einstein could not accept that. He said there has to be a greater perfection somewhere. He said God does not play with dice. I love that episode of the X-Files years ago where Burt Reynolds played God. And God said, God does not play with dice, but does God play checkers? I like checkers. And God cheated at checkers. But anyway, anyway, Albert Einstein said that the imbalance in the universe is called chaos theory. Chaos theory. And this again goes back to the ancient Greeks that we'll be talking about. The Greeks never drew a straight line. They never drew a perfect 90-degree angle. And they never made anything perfectly level, because they said you physically cannot do that. And to pretend that you can is a blasphemy against nature. Against nature. And the Greeks believed that there was one God, that the other gods all answered to. The other gods were just a level above us in the great pyramid of things. But he said they believed that the greater God, which they believed was the whole universe and was completely beyond man's comprehension, never made anything perfect. And for a Greek to attempt to make something look perfect was a blasphemy against that idea. Dark matter, whatever it is, makes up 70% of the universe, and we have no idea what it is, because we've never had any. But then again, we only live in 3 or 4 dimensions. We know there's at least 11 dimensions. So the black matter could be all around us, and we would never perceive that it was there. just like a critter, like a bacteria that lives in a two-dimensional world would have no idea what the third dimension would be like. Okay. Anyway, Albert Einstein said God does not play with dice, with the universe. However, his friend to me, Nicholas Bohr, said that was absolutely necessary. He said that if the universe were absolutely balanced and absolutely perfect, then everything would either never go anywhere, we would never progress, or we would fall back into oblivion, what he called entropy. You stick with me to the end of the end of world history too, we talk about entropy as the last of it. But we talk about entropy as a society, not physical entropy. That is, if we can't continue as a species progressing and coming up with new ideas and a reason to get out of bed in the morning, then one day we'll go like the dinosaurs. We will just disappear because there's no more purpose for our existence. Dinosaurs are a very good example of that. Even before a meteorite finished them off, the dinosaurs were already almost extinct. The meteor only finished off the last of the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs were going nowhere. And this is part of the basic rules of life in the universe, and biology, but not just biology, but physics as well. When something reaches the end of its potential, it becomes extinct. Whether you're talking about a planet, whether you're talking about a civilization, whether you're talking about a species like the human race or the dinosaur, when it reaches its end of its potential, it is extinct, goes extinct to make room for something else that may come along that will be better. Think cockroaches. Think cockroaches. There was a cute Far Side from a cartoon I saw years ago, and it was a family of cockroaches in a museum looking at a skeleton of a human being, and the father is explaining to the children that millions of years ago these dumb brutes ruled the world, but they went extinct to make room for us. Well, it's not impossible. In fact, there are some scientists who cynically argue that our day is already come and gone, and we're already on the way out. We're just too dumb to pick up on it. Okay, anyway, all physics is a gross misunderstanding because we do not have the senses, we do not have the sight, the ability to understand the real rules of science around us. All we can gather is how some of this works so that we can predict the results of an experiment or of an observation. That's the best we can do. Now maybe someday we can build supercomputers that can work in 11 dimensions. They can figure all this stuff out because can make up for what we lack in basic brain power, and we can at least see the answers even if we can't understand the question. Or something. That's not at all impossible. As this goes. But of course, the same thing is true of human beings, and there's plenty of examples out there of how much we don't understand. For example, you look at a star at night, and unless you're on a spaceship, when you look at that star, the star breaks up into 6 points. Okay, every crystal, including a snowflake, has 6 sides to it. Pomegranates have 6 points to it. On Saturn, there's a giant storm that has 6 sides, perfect sides to it. Why in nature is 6 important? Why is it 6 keeps coming up? Why is 6 nature's magic number? And why does it go so unappreciated in mathematics and elsewhere? But why is 6 so important? We'll talk more about 6 another time. Very soon, actually, when we talk about the Babylonians just loved the number 6. And 12, and 30, and 24, and 36, and 360, that just sent them into orbit, thinking about numbers like that you could divide other numbers into. But they couldn't understand why we can do that either. And we'll talk another time about the Greek symbol pi. Why is it that you find pi all over the universe? Why is it the basis of physics? So it's so important that Wallace Steggs Math Club, and I believe, I didn't bring it, dang it, it'll be here next time. There's an invitation for those of you who want to join the Math Club. in here, but our math club every year to celebrate pi, they have a Pi Day, as in P-I-E, not P-I. And, anyway, they have nice round pies and they cut them into circumferences and such. And everybody gets a slice while you have to listen to them explain why this comes out to be the impossible number of pi. Pi is a number that never repeats itself. We'll talk more about that. We'll also talk about the Greek golden ratio. And you'll discover that the reason that you love your love, the guy or gal you love that person, is because their face is so close to the Greek golden ratio. And you thought it was because they had a really cool car. But, nope, it goes with that. Anyway, the newest science spins new science back into old science. When I first heard of the Flat Earth Society, I thought it was just a joke, that it was a funny drinking club or something. But these people do seriously believe the world is flat. And actually, they're right. The world is flat. It's the universe that's round. Now, that will keep you up at night. But Albert Einstein said that the universe has to be round, space has to be round, because if it wasn't round, it would have an edge, and if it had an edge, it would not be boundless and endless, which the universe, he said, is. Most of the particles in the universe are nothing, but some physicists argue that are nothing in themselves. Some collide from time to time to form a new system we would define as living. And then over time, so many of these particles come together that they create not just living creatures, but living creatures like us are the only ones that we know about, living creatures who actually understand that they're living creatures and can think for themselves. And of course, that leads to the greatest scientific debate of all time. Are we alone in the universe? Are we the only intelligent life? And there are philosophers who will tell you we must be because we haven't found any others. And that's the cardinal rule. Until you find others, you must presume you're the only ones. I find that kind of depressing myself. But then there are other scientists who say, there's nothing in our little corner of the universe that's special. If it happened here, it could happen anywhere. I know that sounds like the beginning of a Broadway song. If it happened here, it could happen anywhere. Hey, that could be a big hit on Broadway. We could do chemicals and particles, and they could dance their way into your heart and come together, form elements or something. I can just see the songs being written for it now. Okay. Now, ancient man was not stupid. Ancient man was not stupid. And when I say man, I mean the generic version of man, which means man and woman. When Thomas Jefferson writes the greatest line ever written in the English language, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are endowed by their Creator. He meant men and women, because man and men is a generic term for both sexes in our species. But ancient man or woman was not stupid, although they would probably seem autistic to us. On the other hand, if we went in a time machine and crashed into the ancient world, they would probably think we were mentally retarded. We just can't understand the world around us. We're just so mentally challenged. They're gonna think that people in the future just dump the idiots on them or something. But even as recently as the Dark Ages and such, if you went back in time and you tried to talk to those people and those people tried to talk to you, neither could really understand the other because the world view would be so different. How we each understand the universe would be very different. If we look back at the terrible things that they did in the Dark Ages, the terrible things they did in the ancient world, and we say, how could people do these things? People have no problem doing these things because this is the world they were raised in. This is the world they understood. We'll be talking about the Romans. The Romans believed the world was either prey or predator. The Romans are the predators, everybody else is the prey. Now, it's not like there's some really nice Romans who stand up there and say, that's horrible. Why can't we all just learn to live together and, have a big toga party and wrap our arms around each other and sing Kumbaya? Okay, anybody like that would have ended up in a Roman lunatic asylum. I mean, mean, that idea is so far out there from anything the Romans would understand. And of course, that makes teaching history difficult because we understand history based in our own world. I mean, if there were people out there, if there was some county in Alabama where they took the criminals out of the jail and made them fight to the death in gladiator games, we would be absolutely appalled. Not to the Romans. I mean, they wouldn't have thought, literally would not have thought twice about it. I mean, that's a fine idea, you know, it saves you having to feed all of them. Or something. Okay. Anyway, ancient man was not stupid, but ancient man saw things differently. In the ancient world, and this will really keep you awake at night. In the ancient world, man did not see the living and the non-living as different. They saw a babbling brook or a creek. They saw it as a living thing. When they felt the wind blowing on their face, they believed the wind was a living thing. When the sun came up and the sun went down, they believed it was a living thing. If they picked up a rock, the rock was no less a living thing than you are a living thing. Just different. Okay, moving along. They had the idea that anything can grow, and we are sort of following that idea today. Anything that can grow and can reproduce, grow and reproduce will eventually die. And this is a law of nature that is beyond biology. I mean, in biology, they teach you that all living things, the definition of a living thing is something that can get nourishment and reproduce, seeks nourishment and reproduces. Well, there are physicists who will say that describes the planets. There are historians who will tell you that describes civilization, describes a people. A people will grow old as a culture and die, and it will along the way give birth to other civilizations and cultures that will grow on and become more sophisticated until they die. And this is, like I said, this is an idea that's being accepted more and more. For example, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia, it is against the law to go into a cave and knock down stalactites and stalagmites. Because under the laws of the Commonwealth of Virginia, a cave is a living thing. And you can no more go in there and start bashing around the cave than you can go into your neighbor's house and start bashing your neighbor around. At which somebody in the back is saying, "You mean that's illegal?" I've been doing that for a long time. Presumably the neighbors, not the caves. Environmentalists accept this idea. They talk about the earth as a living planet, and they name it after the Greek god for the earth, which is Gaia. The idea of Gaia, that the earth is a living planet, and that the earth was born and the earth could die, and the earth can be murdered by the human disease that occupies the surface of the earth. So that will keep you up at night. Okay, it is very possible that life and extinction and all other things on this planet are the unintended results of viruses. Viruses are not living things. They are chemical compounds. And they float around in the universe and they join other compounds and become bigger compounds. They are not life because they have no brain, they have no biological system. They don't consume anything. And they can reproduce, but they reproduce as a chemical reaction, not a biological reproduction or anything like that we would know. Your DNA is viruses, strings of viruses that come together and they form you. Now, a lot of the viruses that are connected to your DNA do not serve you in any way, they're just hanging out there. Others, however, are the very reason you exist, the very reason that you have an identity. But think about this, what has created you? What has created you, what makes you? Could be some dumb chemical compound that has no idea that it even exists because it has no brain in any way, shape, or form. Again, going back to the idea that we're all just a symphony, we're all just an algorithm. Okay, intelligent life is not necessarily alive by our traditional definition. For example, mathematics. There are people who will tell you mathematics is a living thing, and it is a growing thing. And it is more alive perhaps than even we are. Wrap your mind around that. Probably nobody sees the stars and galaxies of the universe in the pretty colors that NASA shows us these on their computer reproduction. But yet these places are actually in those colors in some dimension. But it's what you're looking at is actually a mathematical presentation. But just because it's a mathematical presentation doesn't mean it does not exist. It is not real. The Egyptians had a way of talking about that, and we'll deal with that next week, as a matter of fact, when we talk about the Egyptians. The Egyptians believed that whatever they wrote about you on the wall, or in a book, or in a scroll, was the truth. I mean, you might actually have been 4'2", 400 pounds, and smelled bad. But if the Egyptians wrote on the pyramid wall that you were 6'4", had a perfect six-pack, hunky, and all the rest of it, then the reality is what they wrote on the wall. They wrote that what you write and what is remembered is the truth, not the reality as we call it. This is the reason that when in their hieroglyphics, when they painted the snake or they painted a crocodile, they always broke up the crocodile or the snake so it wouldn't eat anybody in the next world. That was their perception of reality. All right. Okay, the Earth is based on a strange set of combinations. If the Earth had not given birth to the moon, life on this planet would not exist. The Earth is in the right place with regards to the sun to create the life that we know it. We are not too hot, and we are not too cold. And if you want to see what failure can be like, look at the planet Venus, which hardly rotates at all. It could probably never have life, anything like what we know it. Or look at Mars, or look at Jupiter, or all these other failed planets. But does that mean that life could not exist on these other planets? Again, that goes back to that big debate. Maybe under other circumstances it could. Maybe with regards to Mars, once upon a time it did. Or maybe even on Venus once upon a time, before things got really bad there. Life on Earth, as we know it, is based around carbon. Carbon is so important to us that there's a whole field of chemistry built around it. Most important field of chemistry that there is. And if you get a degree from our excellent chemistry program, and you go on to get a more advanced degree in chemistry, there's really good paying jobs in this. And this is called organic chemistry. And this is the chemistry of all living things. But what separates organic chemistry from all other chemistries? Simply carbon. Carbon. Now it is possible to build an entire life system around nitrogen. It can be mathematically done. But if you had creatures that were built around nitrogen, which by the way is the most common gas on our planet, if you built creatures built around nitrogen instead of carbon, they would be so radically different from the rest of us, we can't imagine what a nitrogen-based life form would look like. Although you can see one in the movies. Remember E.T., the adorable little alien? He was nitrogen-based. Which is why when they put him in the container and they preserved him by flooding it with nitrogen, basically they were reviving it. As that goes. Anyway, there are a number of other chemicals that, but anyway, life, even if it were intelligent life built on nitrogen, it would be very different from us as well, because nitrogen, you can't burn nitrogen. You cannot burn nitrogen, so that means the intelligent creatures never had fire. Everything in our life, in our society, our civilization is built around fire. We live in environment that allowed us fire. The Greeks even had a story about it. A god named Prometheus, who brings human beings were suffering and starving and the rest of it. He teaches us fire, and when he teaches us fire, we can have civilization. We can become closer to being the gods, and one day we finally defeat the gods and we replace the gods with science. But temporal Prometheus is punished for all eternity, chained to a rock, because the gods are not supposed to interfere in human events. Again, we'll talk more about the Greek. Okay, I know I've got a list of these somewhere. Okay, and of course, we would have to be based in oxygen in order to have something to burn. Well, I know I've got it in here somewhere, so I'm not going to bother looking for it. I'll just go ahead and talk about it. But there are a number, oh yeah, here we go under number 2 here. There are many elements that are necessary for life on this planet that under other circumstances are toxic. For example, if somebody floods you with too much oxygen, believe it or not, you will suffocate. You can't take too much oxygen. Same time, wars have been fought, empires have been built over salt. Yet too much salt will kill you. It will kill any living thing. Salt is one of the world's great antiseptics. It will kill anything, including diseases and bacteria. Yet you can't survive without salt, but too much of it will kill you. And there are other, phosphorus is another example of this, and even carbon. Too much of phosphorus or carbon. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of a chemistry course here. Believe it or not, I seriously considered going into chemistry instead of this. I just love the equations in chemistry and what that means. I had the perfect partner. He did all the lab work, which I always thought was stupid, and I did all the paperwork and the equations, which I really liked. It's the two of us that continued after college together, so no telling what we might have achieved. Okay. Anyway, let's talk about the basic elements. All right, carbon. Carbon is plus and minus 4 on the periodic scale, plus and minus 4. That means carbon is just adorable. Carbon will join with anybody. Carbon is the slut of the periodic table. It will bond with anything, any chemical. That's why it is the basis of our form of life. And in anywhere else in the universe, the life is probably going to be carbon-based, because carbon will take 4 or give 4. It will take and give whatever. So, I mean, I'm saying there could be a place in the universe where carbon is not the king, but it would be an odd place. It would be an odd place. Okay, oxygen. Oxygen is plus 5 and minus 3. Plus 5 and minus 3. It would love to be carbon, but it's not. It's carbon's ugly sister, and it has a terrible disease. And anytime you combine oxygen with anything, you're in trouble. Wherever oxygen goes, whatever it is will get old and die. It'll get old and die, or it will burn up. Rust is combustion very slow. Fire is combustion very fast. Both of them involve oxygen. And then there's nitrogen. Nitrogen is minus 5 and plus 3. And nobody likes nitrogen. Nitrogen has no friends. You know, nitrogen goes on the internet and nobody will friend it. Nobody will be a part of it. Consequently, when you try to force nitrogen to have a relationship, it ends badly. For example, when you force nitrogen to have a relationship with glycerin, yeah, it works out for a moment, but don't drop it, or there's going to be a large hole in the ground. As the two of them discover, they were just not meant for each other. And of course, there's many other elements that do not like to bond with other elements. Gold, I do not know what gold's periodical number is. But gold does not, and mercury. In fact, gold and mercury, they're the only two elements that like each other. Is gold and mercury. So gold will bond with mercury, mercury will bond with gold. They almost will not bond with anything else. They were just meant for each other. Anyway, now we've talked about the chemical dating game. to explain something about the universe and how we live. Life may have begun in outer space, and we now believe that it did. They found the cutest little critters. You need a microscope to see them. They've got 8 legs. They have no eyes, no ears, well, they may have some kind of a brain, I don't know. But these tiny little mite breeders, and they live in outer space, and they live on Earth. They live on your couch. And they live everywhere. And if they live in an environment where they can't get anything to eat, they just shut down, and they can be shut down for all eternity, or until they come into an environment that they can consume whatever little bit it is that they consume, and they can reproduce. There are scientists who believe that there were critters like that that passed from planet to planet. Most of them never got anywhere. Most of them end up being burned up in the sun somewhere, or in the atmosphere of some awful planet where they can't reproduce. Others come to some place like Earth. They like the nutrients in the Earth's atmosphere. They prosper here, and then over time they will evolve into bigger creatures. That's, well, like I said, it makes you wonder. But we found these critters, and they can exist anywhere on this planet. They really like our world. And I might add, aside from being adorable, they're completely harmless. Okay, now let's talk about some of the rules of life. And again, this goes back to basic mathematics. Life encourages diversity, while mediocrity is pushed out of the way. That was what was happening to the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs had gotten as far as they could, and so they died out. Now, it does not mean that there's a supreme being who's looking at all of this and saying, well, the dinosaurs had their chance, it's now time to move them out. They do that on their own. They're limited by their DNA and how far they can go. There's a reason that the dinosaurs and human beings did not exist at the same time. And that's because the dinosaurs were the dominant species, and the mammals, which once upon a time were a prominent species, we become little bitty critters, cocker spaniel size, and no bigger than that, trying not to get eaten by the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are gone, the birds are gone, these little furry animals move on to become the mammals and to dominate the world. Their time comes in the era of extinction of the creatures that came before them. Okay, anyway, the thing of it is this, we can have life as it exists on a place like Earth for billions of years, and it's going nowhere. And then that life falls into a situation that causes it to evolve into something better. This is called a mutation. Exposure to radiation, exposure to heat, exposure to a new chemical at just the right moment, and the viruses or the amoebas or bacteria or whatever was there moves on to something else. Now, most of the time, the something else isn't going to go anywhere either, but once in a while, there's a very special something else that dominates everything else, that reproduces. Now, these basic laws continue on to our own, on to much bigger species. If you ever raise dogs, you know that a purebred dog is sick and weak and malfunctional. For example, a bulldog. Bulldogs can't have puppies. They have to have cesarean sections because we have bred bulldogs to the point that female bulldogs can no longer make puppies. They have to be, like I said, by a cesarean section. On the other hand, if you know mutts and curs, these are mixed breed dogs. They are biologically stronger because they gain the benefits of multiple species, such as the famous Georgia Shepherd. A Georgia Shepherd is something that is obviously part German Shepherd, and the rest of the dog, God only knows what it is. But we Georgians do love our Georgia Shepherds. They are loving animals and very healthy animals, very healthy animals. But anyway, this is what I'm trying to say is life discourages incest. And by duplicating the DNA through incest, over time you create genetic weaknesses that result in those critters going extinct. On the other hand, people who breed, any species that breeds with different groups of their own species, they become stronger by gaining the advantages from the other species. Back in Texas, after the Civil War, everybody was going broke. They were so desperate, they were rounding up Texas Longhorns and herding them by the millions to Kansas City to try to sell them at the stockyards. Now, what's wrong with the Texas Longhorn? Question is, what's right about a Texas Longhorn? They are all sinew and muscle and no beef, no meat. There's really little meat on a Texas Longhorn, and they're covered with these ticks that have all these terrible diseases that they spread to other cows. What's the solution to save Texas? They bring in the Angus cow from England. The Angus cow does not like Texas very much. Texas is too hot, Texas is too cold. Texas is always too much of something, one way or the other. However, you take those Angus cows and you breed them with a Texas Longhorn, and you create the American Angus, which you see all around Blountsville, Alabama these days. Black and red American Angus, whose ancestors were Texas Longhorns, so they could survive our environment, but their ancestors are all English, Scottish Angus cows, which put a lot of meat on the cow, which makes it profitable to produce it. In other words, the American Angus is a curve between the wild Texas Longhorn and the overbred Scottish Angus cow. And the result is an animal that is much more suitable for our environment. Okay, anyway, elephants, human beings and elephants are the only creatures on earth that recognize family members. And why even dead ones? Elephants will even recognize remember dead relatives. But why do elephants remember their relatives? So that they will not breed with them. It's a defense against incest. Okay. Anyway, the motivation for sex overrides almost all other aspects of any living thing's life, including people. That diseases like syphilis survive and are widespread proves the power of sex. Sexually transmitted disease may be responsible for monogamy. Once upon a time, we were a species where everybody bred with everyone else, but then syphilis comes along, and maybe you want to stick with a partner, you know, is clean or something. Human beings, now you know, there's some things I know you found disturbing that I've said this morning. This is going to get disturbing too. Why is it that human beings have evolved so quickly once we became a species? Why did we move so fast, and why did we become so big and strong and so very smart? And for us ugly people like myself, this really is heartbreaking. But anyway, don't think that I'm discriminating against ugly people. But the thing of it is, we are the only species except for dolphins that looks at the person, our partner when we're having sex. In other words, all other species do not care who they breed with. Only human beings and dolphins, and of course elephants. But only human beings and dolphins. And we face each other when we're doing this, and that's the reason we do it, face to face. Yes, let's not get into a conversation about alternative ways of, anyway. Anyway, as a species, we do it face to face. And because we see who we're breeding with, who we care about who we are breeding with, that's resulted in children that generation after generation were better than their parents. What is the old African saying? When a baby is born, the father takes the baby out under the stars and holds the baby to the sky and shouts out, the only part that is ever greater than the whole. In other words, the next generation is always better than the generation that came before it. Always thought that was the most beautiful thing to do. Okay, as this is. Now, by the way, dolphins are incredible critters, and if you read a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, you know they're actually smarter than we are. But anyway, dolphins are very smart critters. Dolphins and human beings are the only creatures on Earth that recognize that when we look in a mirror, we're only looking at our reflection. Only looking at our reflection, not, and I might add to that, human beings for thousands and thousands of years thought we were looking into another world. The dolphins had already figured out it's just a reflection. It's just a reflection. Okay. Okay, dolphins, by the way, also sleep half awake. That way they don't drown. I'll believe that. Dolphins actually sleep, well, it's not sleepwalking, I guess it's sleep swimming, so that they don't drown. Anyway, dolphins and human beings are just about the only, and elephants are just about the only creatures with that kind of self-awareness, other than apes. And for example, your dog is a mammal. Your dog loves you. You yell, "Here, Fluffy," and Fluffy comes running to you. But does Fluffy understand that its name is Fluffy? No, it just thinks, here, Fluffy, means run up here and that guy will give you a treat. Or at least scratch you behind your ears or something. Animals just don't, almost all other species do not have any sense of self-awareness. And by not having a sense of self-awareness, they don't understand family, they don't predict the future, they don't look into the past, they have no history, and they can evolve no further than the dinosaurs did, because the dinosaurs lacked all of this as well. We have the gift, whether Prometheus gave it to us or not, of self-awareness. Each one of you is a separate universe. And everything in all the universe exists for no other purpose than to serve you. That's the attitude you were born with, and it's not a bad point of view, really. It's not really a bad point of view. All right, family emerges from our sex drive and our need to reproduce children, but family develops as a partnership. Now, we can go out there and we can breed, and we can take our chances on what happens to the children, but even the dinosaurs were better parents than that. So what we do is we get together, we form family units to protect the babies, and to guarantee the babies will grow up to be adults like us, even if we originally did not have much of a sense of the future either. But that's what family was created for, so we can share resources, so that we can create children at the right time. There's an exciting new theory about Stonehenge. That Stonehenge was not designed to remind everybody when to plant your crops and when to harvest your crops, and when not to go out to sea, but to know when for everybody to get together and breed their animals, and when to breed themselves, when to produce children. So if the children would be born at the right time of year, that there would be enough for them to eat, and their chances of survival would be better. Which, like I said, is an incredible idea. Like I said, the ancient people were not stupid, they just saw things differently, and they were not as technically advanced as we are. Anyway, civilization is family on steroids. The families come together and form a village so we can share resources to raise our children better and give our children a better chance. Now, with civilization and with family, there come rules that sometimes violate biology. You know what it's like, you want to date this certain person, and you mention it to your grandmother then tells you all about their family history, and that they all come from, that person comes from a family of drunks and thieves and whatever. If you're from a southern family, this is common. You know, grandma always knows the negatives of everybody's family and tries to talk you out of marrying this person because, what's that old southern saying? Well, there was an old country western song that you're the reason our kids are ugly. You know, putting it in that way. But on the other hand, we have a biological need to be with people who are biologically dissimilar. What is it your grandmother always told you? Opposites attract. Not really for that purpose. Most of the time you marry someone, or however you define it. You marry someone, or however you define it, with somebody who is from your class of people, your village, your community. As we say in genealogy, true love may know no bounds, but you always marry the girl next door. But all these laws against black people and white people marrying, or about Chinese marrying with anybody, or whatever in different time periods in history, these were all civilization trying to impose its rules over biology. And it's been my experience over and over again, biology always wins. But this is the whole idea. Let us breed children that will be the best that we can make them and give them every opportunity. As a consequence of this, the richer your family becomes, the more your family will have fewer children. The richer a family gets, the fewer children it has, but the fewer children it has get much more attention, get much more to eat. If you're a poor family, you have more children, in hopes that some of the children will live, and they'll be able to take care of you in your old age or something. And that's a biological law that overrides civilization and everything else. In genealogy, as a family prospers and grows, you see this over time. 1800, the average American couple may have had 8 or 9 kids. 1900, the average American family is having 5 or 6 kids. 1960, the average American couple is having 4 kids. Today, I think we're having 1 1/3 kid. Now, some of you mathematicians, or maybe some demographers here, explain to me what a 1/3 of a kid is. I don't get that, but anyway. Why? Because we are wealthier and we spend more money on the kids that we have to give them a better chance. All right, once upon a time, children were a person's only legacy. The only thing you could leave behind were your children. And of course, that sort of encouraged you to have lots of children, I guess. But now, from that same thing, we leave books behind, we leave art behind, we leave technology and ideas and other things behind other than children. But when an author refers to their books as their children, refers to their paintings as their children, or a scientist refers to his machines as his children or something, there really is some truth behind it. It all comes out of that same biological urge. All right, know that life on this planet began in the sea. And by the way, know that all life comes from carbon. But know that all life on this planet comes from the sea. And we are sea creatures. We spend the first 9 months of our lives underwater. And if you take your baby to the sea, and you put your baby in the sea, a shark will eat, you take your baby to the sea, or a large swimming pool, don't be the least bit surprised if your baby swims just fine. And why not? The baby, like I said, spent 9 months underwater. Now, if you took a knife and you said, I can't take this class anymore, and you slit your wrist, and the blood comes out of you, it will turn red. However, if we could go inside you, your blood is actually the color of seawater. It only turns red when it's exposed to so much oxygen. And it's not a surprise there because your blood is chemically basically seawater, salt and the rest of it. And again, you drink too much seawater and you will go crazy and then you will die. But nonetheless, your blood system is basically seawater. We walk around the earth in spacesuits full of seawater. And just like the tides, the full moon affects us just like the tide for the same reason, because we are the tides walking around. Or what, 70% seawater the human being would be as this goes. And it would still remains with us today. 70% of this planet is covered in water, and 80% of the people who live on this planet live near a large body of water. We just can't get away from it. That the sea is our original home. Now, you might think, and this is kind of funny or sad in a sort of strange sort of way. There's nobody in this room who's ever taught how to swim. That must come as a big surprise. Nobody in this room has ever taught how to swim. You were born knowing how to swim because you're a sea creature. Even embryos still have their gills. They become their ear bones eventually. But no, nobody was ever taught how to swim. What you were taught is how to overcome your fear of drowning. You're taught to overcome your fear of drowning, not how to swim. Not how to swim. Okay. Know for your test that the greatest achievement that the human species has ever created is that we took life to another planet. We landed men on the moon. Now, that life is not still on the moon, although who knows, maybe some bacteria or something they took with them is having a good time on the moon or something, who knows. But the greatest achievement human beings have ever made is to bring life to a lifeless rock. Although there's some scientists out there now saying that the moon is not lifeless. We just didn't know where to look. That would be an exciting thing to find. But anyway, okay, life changes with the environment. It encourages DNA to change some switches and turn some timing off on critters. Within every line of human beings, or any line of living things, there are mutations about every 100 years. Most mutations do not change anything. This is the effect of the environment on your DNA. Most mutations do not affect anything. And most embryos or other life forms that have serious mutations are stillborn. This is nature's form of abortion, if you would, in order to prevent the life from suffering or being a waste of time. However, some mutations survive and continue and spread. Queen Victoria, she was a mutant. That must sound scandalous. But we know from her DNA that she had a mutation in her that changed her DNA that allowed her to pass hemophilia on to her children. Women cannot have hemophilia, only men. This is a disease where if a man is cut, he can't stop bleeding. But Queen Victoria's children either passed the hemophilia gene on to their children, or their sons died from hemophilia in many cases. This actually had a huge effect on history. The Romanov family that ruled Russia, their heir apparent, he had hemophilia that he inherited from his grandmother, Queen Victoria. He had the hemophilia gene. The family was so desperate to save him because he was their only son that they bring in this quack named Rasputin. And Rasputin is a hypnotist and he's a very influential fellow. The next thing you know, he's persuading the Tsar, the Tsarina to do all sorts of crazy things that results in the Russian Revolution, the Soviet Union, all of these other things. If the heir to the throne had not had hemophilia, maybe things would have turned out differently. If Queen Victoria had not had that gene passed down. Greatest achievement in your lifetime has been successfully mapping the human genome. We now know exactly what it is to be human in the form of 4 letters and their combination. Problem with that is we discovered that genetics is far more complicated than we will ever know. Every time we try to fix somebody's broken genes to help them out, we end up killing them from something else. That's because we just do not know enough, and it's going to be a long time before we know enough to understand how genes in combination work. Okay, anyway, if you think you're so important, understand the average human being has 23,000 genes. 23,000 genes, that sounds impressive. An ear of corn has more. And 23,000 genes is about the same number of genes as an earthworm. And genetically speaking, the difference between you and a chimpanzee is only 3%. Or as I like to point out, if the difference between a chimpanzee and Albert Einstein is only 3%, then what is the genetic difference between a man and a woman, between a black man and a white man, between any of these so-called races? And if you're mathematicians out there, you're saying less than 3% does not statistically matter. I agree with you. Racism doesn't matter. Racism does not matter. So let's make a deal from now on not to do that. Not to remember racism is nothing but skin color. All right, now let's talk about the human brain. I beg your pardon, I was being unfair to chimpanzees. Chimpanzees do not have 97% of our genes, they have 99% of our genes. And I know somebody in the back saying, I believe that of my brother-in-laws. I do too. Okay, now let's talk about the human brain. Okay, there is a thing I believe in that I call the law of proportion. You remember in your science class, your science teacher said that if a flea were the size of a Volkswagen, the flea can jump over the Empire State Building. Actually, what would happen is if a flea were the size of a Volkswagen, it would crush under its own weight. It would never get off the ground. In other words, I believe the laws of physics apply to some differently to objects, based on their mass, their size, if you would, their mass, their size, as it goes. All right, insects are little bitty critters. Well, some of them not so little bitty. Anyway, insects are very small critters, very small critters. Average insect only has 3 or 4 brain cells, and an insect's brain cells are pretty much the same size as your brain cells. Brain cells are pretty much brain cells, are pretty much brain cells. Okay, a poor little ant can't think very much. I mean, it doesn't have big dreams. Ants do not paint paintings, they don't have concerts, things like that. But because they are so small, in order to survive, they have communal brains. That is, in an ant's nest, all the ants are connected to all the other ants. And they all use their brains together as a mass. And this way, if they find something good to eat, they all run out and get something to eat, except those who are left behind to take care of the babies and take care of the queen. And no, the queen isn't commanding this, the queen is just a baby machine. That's all the queen exists for. But anyway, the ants and bees are the same way. They have a communal brain that directs them as a horde, as a hive, as whatever. And they have this because they're so tiny they can't develop bigger brains to more efficiently run things. Okay, the bigger the brain, the smarter the critter, because the critter has more brain cells. However, by the same token, there's also a correlation between physical size. For example, a whale has a much bigger brain than we do, but a whale is not smarter than us. Why? Because a whale is physically so much bigger than we are, and so much more of its brain is used for running the whale, if you would. Now, whales are still pretty smart critters, but they'll never be on the same level we are because they're just so big, and that takes up so much of their brain power. All right, fish and lower animals. Fish and lower animals only have mechanical brains. They only have mechanical brains. They can't do anything except eat and drink and make little critters, make babies. They eat and they make babies, and that's pretty much it. Yeah, I know you're upset to hear that. You go home to your goldfish every night, and you think your goldfish loves you, and that your goldfish is waiting for you, and to drop some fish food in its tank. And you just decide yourself that every time you see your goldfish, it's the first time you've ever met. So why is a goldfish coming to the glass waiting for you to be fed? Is it because it knows you love it? No. It knows that if every night, if it stands there at the right moment, fish food is going to drop on them. Fish food is going to drop on them. Fish do not have any more brains than that. Now, believe it or not, there's been some exciting new developments in science, and they found an exception to this. Sharks. They now know that sharks can think, sharks can remember you and not just what you taste like. You can train sharks to do tricks. You can have a shark for a friend. Sharks can recognize you from other human beings, you know, on a menu maybe. But, okay, I'm not getting anywhere with my shark jokes. But anyway, this is a very exciting new field in ecology, which is the study of fish. That there's actually a fish that can do more than just eat, sleep, and make little fish. A shark can do all of these things. They don't look for a shark, you know, to write the next great novel or something like that. But they are not just the dumb brutes we thought they were. Which if you've been following all those Jaws movies over the years, you've already figured that out. But anyway, fish have only a mechanical brain. Reptiles have a second brain. And this is an emotional brain that makes reactionary decisions. What's the old saying in Florida? How is the only way you can outrun an alligator? And that's pass the person in front of you when you're being chased by an alligator. But an alligator has a reptilian brain. And this causes the mama alligator to fight for her babies We used to see these pictures of alligators in swamps, and they have their babies in their teeth, and we honestly thought that the mama gator was eating her baby. No, she brings them all inside of her mouth to protect them from a potential danger. When the danger is gone, she opens her mouth and all those babies fall out into the swamp or whatever. But they have an emotional reptilian brain, and this functions 24/7, even when they're sleeping, to protect their young, and to work out problems. I don't know what kind of problems an alligator would have or a snake would have, but it helps them to resolve these problems. All right, mammals have a mammalian brain. So mammals have a mechanical brain. This is what's operating your heart and your lungs right now. And there's some holy men in India, whatever, and they can actually get into their mechanical brain and slow their heart and slow their breathing down to almost nothing. Then you have a reptilian brain, which is the source of all of your emotion. You're at the Last Chance liquor store down in Warrior, somebody comes up to you and throws their drink in your face. What's your immediate reaction? Let's sit down and talk this over like civilized men. No, your immediate reaction is to punch them out. That's your reptilian reaction. You see the building is on fire and burning. Is your first thought, I've got to save my classmates, I've got to save my professor? No, your first thought is, I've got to get out of here, and I've got to get out of here now. That's your reptilian brain. When you have danger, or you have love, or you have passion, it is your reptilian brain. And then you have a mammalian brain. And a mammalian brain can come up with ideas. It can do thinking, it can make decisions. It can override the reptilian brain. Somebody comes up to you at a bar and throws a drink in your face, and maybe you want to punch them out, but then you realize they're 6'5", 5 feet across the shoulders, and they look like they could pound you into the floor. Your mammalian brain says, let's think about this for a moment before we start a fist fight. Okay, now for more on this, read Carl Sagan's award-winning book, The Dragons of Eden, which deal with, but know the three brains, the mechanical brain, the reptilian brain, and the mammalian brain. Now, your mammalian brain uses up most of your energy, and it gets tired and exhausted. What is sleep? Sleep is when you lay down, and you shut down your mammalian brain. Your mammalian brain is all of your body that's really resting, because it's been busy thinking great thoughts. Now your reptilian brain, however, is still awake and going strong. In fact, now it's really in charge. This is why people sleepwalk. And what else does your reptilian brain cause while you're sleeping?
Dreams.
What?
Dreams.
Absolutely. Have you ever had a dream where you were just cutting the grass, or you were just sitting in a lawn chair having something to drink, and nothing was going on? Now, every dream you've ever had, there was passion in it. There was love, there was hatred, there was humor. And again, it comes from your reptilian brain, which is all emotion. And what it's doing is it's feeding in to your memories, the memories that are stored into your brain from the day. Now, while you're sleeping, your reptilian brain is up and about, helping itself to a snack from the refrigerator, helping itself to its memories. It's remembering the day. It remembers how you struggled so hard. You struggled so hard on those math equations, on that biology project, and you got absolutely nowhere. And in your sleep, your reptilian brain is repeating all of this over and over again, and then suddenly it wakes up, the reptilian brain wakes up your mammalian brain and says, I've got the solution, I've got the answer. So your eyes open, you wake up, you reach up for the notepad beside your bed, you write down the good idea that came to you in your sleep. And that's where creativity comes from. It comes from an imperfect memory of what happened during the day. Your reptilian brain repeating the day, only the brain is changing things around maybe to what you wanted them to be, what you suspect they were, things of this sort. Okay, so our reptilian brain, as they say, this is where dreams come from. And it's for this reason we will never have artificial intelligence. I've heard some of you computer people hurt your feelings, well, get over it. But there's no true such thing as artificial intelligence. Something like Data on Star Trek: The Next Generation would never exist, because these interactions are purely biological, they are human, and they can't be duplicated by an over-glorified adding machine, which is what the world's most powerful computer would be. Okay, human creativity also comes from trying to find a mate and trying to get that mate to find you. That is, having the coolest car, being the biggest, bravest warrior, being the greatest princess, proving that you're a good cook. And if any of that comes across to you as sexist, I do apologize. But all the different things we do to win over the person we love. Aside from the fact that they have the golden ratio in their face. Okay, people have collective societal memories, what we call local history, where we remember our past, where we come from, and we have elders to tell us the stories of where we come from. We come from the Black Forest, we come from Hainan province, we come from wherever. We had ancestors who did this, we had ancestors who did that. Sometimes not always the best thing. There's a very controversial aspect of being a human called deja vu. And there's a lot of people who don't, it's called genetic memories actually, it's called genetic memory. No genetic memories for your test. Many scientists, including the late great Isaac Asimov, said that this is complete nonsense. But it is the idea that everything that ever happened to you and everything that ever happened to any of your ancestors is recorded somewhere in your head. And when you have dreams of the past, like Gore Vidal wrote his novels about, you're actually reliving an experience that actually took place way back when. Now, as I said, there's a lot of scientists who say this is nonsense. Isaac Asimov said, this is ridiculous. Can you imagine how much space would be needed to store up the memories of everybody who ever lived before you? How much space that would take up? On the other hand, look at you. You are billions and billions of cells, but you only started with 2. And from those 2 cells, you became everything you have. There's also another area of physics that's looking into this and challenging this. There's a small group of human beings who can relive every day they've ever lived. You tell them what day, and they can go back to that day. There was a TV show that was made out of this. Unforgettable, I think it was. Believe it or not, there really are people like that. And of course, all the great classic detectives like Sherlock Holmes and Hercule Poirot, they all had this ability to relive every day they've ever had. And when they explained how this works, they said it's like you go back to that day and you're there watching everything going on around you, but nobody knows you're there. Now, how does that work? Some people say it's in your brain. Other people say it's not. That we could do that. Anybody can do that. It's just some people have a special ability in their brain to look through time. They're actually looking through time to where they have been. It's pretty out there too. But for example, there's a thing I read on Facebook the other day that really hit home on this. They were saying, do you believe in alien abductions? And they said, I do. I walk into a room all the time and I can't remember why I walked in there. I think I was kidnapped by aliens and they erased my brain after probing me or something. Well, maybe there's something to that. Maybe the reason you can't remember what you came into the room for is because this isn't the room this isn't the same room you're going into. You go to places like the Valley of Virginia or whatever, and you come to some place and you say to yourself, I've never been here, but I know what's around the corner. I know what's just over the hill. I know who lives in that house. I know what's inside that house, but you've never been there in your life. That's called deja vu. And the question is, maybe you did. And some people say this is where reincarnation comes from, and ideas like that. All right, well, I've given you a lot to think about today, probably keep you up at night. But, let me give you brains food, but